I'd like to welcome back for his fourth time here at Clark College to the Business Web Practices Speaker Series for 2017, Mr. Aaron Hockley.
All right, thanks, Bruce. As Bruce said, we've known each other for 7-8 years at this point. We met on the internet, which is kind of a weird way to meet random people, but it's more common now. I was talking to somebody recently that, I've been married for almost 17 years at this point, and the whole concept of if I were to start dating again, everything has changed in that realm. It would just be so different with the whole online aspect. But anyway, you're not here to hear me talk about my dating history. Bruce talked about I'm going to, the first in his lecture series, but I'm certainly not going to stand here and talk for an hour straight. Like Bruce said, let's make this interactive. Ask me some questions. I have kind of a few loose notes of things I want to kind of hit on, but as we go, I'm sure you guys are going to have some questions that may lead us in other directions, and that's okay. So a little bit of background on what I do and kind of how I ended up in the world that makes me relevant to talk to a business web practices class. So my background is in tech and software development, and I actually went to Clark College a couple of years ago, in the late 90s. Went here for a couple of years, ended up actually dropping out of college without finishing my degree, and taking a job where I was drawn away by the allure of money at the time. And since then, basically kind of self-taught the rest of my way into the software development world, both into application development and then into software testing, and have kind of been in that world as my main thing ever since. A couple other things that kind of came together that make me relevant for a business web practices class. So I have that tech background. Something else that happened along the way is with that tech background, back in, say, 2000, 2001, I started playing around with blogs as those became, a thing. At the time, we didn't have content management systems really like WordPress or Drupal or anything like that. There was some blog software, but you kind of had to set it up on your own. You didn't have real fancy interfaces for managing that. You published your blog. RSS became a thing, really simple syndication, which is how people started to subscribe to blogs. That was interesting to watch that take off. It started out with basically just the tech nerds, got a little bit wider adoption, and then we started to see companies try to build products on top of blog subscriptions and RSS. Google Reader probably became the most popular and well-known blog subscription platform that existed until Google shut that down. God, it's probably been 5 years ago now. And the online publishing world has kind of changed over time with that. So I got into blogging. Something else that happened is I got into photography, first as a hobby, and then I started doing photography professionally part-time in 2008. So I'm coming up on 10 years of that. As I was a hobbyist photographer, I would take my camera to events and things like that, and I would share those pictures with friends, or I'd put them online through Flickr. And at some point, people were like, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. Can I pay you money to come to my event with a camera and take pictures?" And I said, "Yes, you can certainly pay me money to come and do something like that." And so I got into photography part-time professionally. And I've been doing that ever since. And so we have the background in tech, we have the background with blogging, we have the background with photography. And over time, I've done a few different things that have kind of mixed those worlds together. Where that kind of ends up, and most of what I will be talking about kind of today in context, is that I now run a site called photowebo.com, which basically is all about empowering photographers on the internet. So I help photographers have a better online presence, whether that is helping them figure out how to share their photography. If you're a professional photographer, that can involve things like how do you set up your photography website, how do you look at things like search engine optimization for photographers, how do you figure out online marketing for professional photographers. And so I've kind of mixed all of these backgrounds together to create a website that provides resources for serious photographers, whether they're either just serious hobbyists that want to have a cool online presence, or more commonly, and the ones that end up giving me money to make that happen, are professionals. With almost 10 years of experience kind of in the professional photography world at this point, I've kind of figured out what professionals are looking for there. I've gotten involved with that industry. I've done some speaking at photography conferences about technology topics. I've done some speaking at technology conferences about photography topics. This year I'm actually the president of the Oregon Professional Photographers Association, and so that's provided some interesting opportunities to connect with different people in kind of the photography industry. But where that all mixes together really is through PhotoWebbo as a business. And what I'm going to talk about today is how you can use the internet as a platform for an online business, really around selling information or providing resources where people will indirectly give you money for access to information or services. There's a lot of people out there doing this around a lot of different topics. Name any possible topic, and there's probably a way to make money with it on the internet. Whether that's photography, whether that's gardening, whether that's remote-controlled car racing, whether that's a sports topic. As you guys know, there's websites out there about all of these things, and there's people that have independent websites around all of these topics that have found ways to turn those into businesses. Some people are doing it as a full-time business. Some people are doing it as a part-time business. That's where I'm at. This is not my full-time job. That said, it does make me money. I got a notification in my email this morning of, hey, this a web hosting company that I work with here's a check for a bunch of money for recommending our web hosting and driving referral traffic to us. So kind of where that goes is there's an opportunity out there if you want to become an authority on something. And, how do you become an authority on something? Well, on the internet, the main way that happens is that you demonstrate that you know what you're doing. You get other people to provide some sort of proof that people think that you know what you're doing, whether that's in the forms of recommendations and links from their website, whether that's getting them to recommend and share your stuff on social media in various forms. And so, over time, you build up that credibility, and you can kind of develop a platform. So we're going to talk about kind of a mixture of things here. A little bit of it's going to be kind of technology. Some of it's going to be marketing. Some of it's going to be business and a little bit of entrepreneurship. And so as I kind of go through that, and I'll probably kind of hit it in that order, feel free to raise your hand. Let me know if you have a question. But as far as developing kind of that platform, really your home base for your online business is really going to be your website of some sort. Social media is great. Social media comes and goes over the years. Just kind of real quick, might be interesting to do a show of hands. So how many of you are on Facebook? Just raise your hand if you're on Facebook. So almost everybody. There's probably one or two that maybe aren't. That's pretty typical of the size of group.
Still on MySpace.
Right, yeah. Is anybody actively using MySpace now? No, but you might have been if we go back 5 or 8 years. How many people use Twitter? Okay. Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, what am I forgetting? LinkedIn, right? Often a forgotten social network, but one that's still out there. And so, I've probably forgotten some. There's probably been a new one invented since I started this talk. But right, yeah, GitHub, which in addition to being a source code repository, has kind of the networking, the social features built in as well. And so these different social network sites come and go over the years as different features gain popularity, as the companies that run them make either smart or bad business decisions. And so one of the things that we've seen is if you go back, say, 5 years in time, a lot of online businesses would try to establish kind of their core online presence on a social network site. maybe that's on a Facebook page. Maybe they try to drive all their traffic to, I don't know, Pinterest. Well, not 5 years ago, maybe a couple of years ago. But the idea is that they're trying to, gain all that following. They're trying to connect with everybody, but they're building their platform essentially on someone else's business. And probably the biggest, most common example of this that you guys are all going to be able to relate to, because almost everybody's there, or at least you're familiar with it, is Facebook. So Facebook started out as a social network for college students, and then it opened up to the public for everybody to have a public, profile page where you can be yourself as a person. They added business pages at some point where anybody with a business or an interest could set up a page around, for their business. And then the big thing was to try and get as many likes as you could on your Facebook business page. And that's still a thing, because by liking someone's Facebook business page, you would start to see their stuff show up in your Facebook feed. And at the time that Facebook was kind of really taking off in popularity, the Facebook news feed, which you guys are probably all realize at this point, you don't see everything that gets published. So just because you're friends with somebody or just because you've liked somebody's page, they may publish things, but you don't see all of that. Facebook uses an algorithm to decide what it thinks is the most interesting stuff that you're going to be, excited to see, and that's what it shows to you. But at the time, when Facebook was really taking off, that algorithm was showing you almost everything. And so a business that could get you to like their Facebook page was going to get whatever they published on their Facebook page in front of you pretty easily. And they were doing that for free. Yeah, they could pay a little money to run Facebook ads to, reach further, but by and large, if you followed someone's Facebook page, you would see their stuff in your feed. So businesses would spend a lot of time and they would spend a lot of money on advertising campaigns to drive people to like their Facebook page, and that was where they were investing in their digital infrastructure. We go about probably 3 to 4 years ago, Facebook started really making some hard changes in their algorithms around what do you see in your Facebook feed. And really what it boils down to is your Facebook business pages became pay to play. Most things that you're going to see in your Facebook news feed from businesses are things that those businesses have essentially sponsored to show up in your Facebook news feed. If you like, 100 pages on Facebook, odds are you're not seeing that much from those pages in your feed compared to how much they're publishing. And so businesses who built their audience on Facebook, now we're in this interesting predicament where, great, I got, 5,000 people to like my Facebook page, but I can't reach 5,000 of them without spending a bunch of money on Facebook advertising to either boost my posts or to run explicit, advertising itself, ads. So that's always a risk that you run when you build your business on someone else's platform. It's kind of the difference between renting and owning, whether it's your house, whether it's a business location. When you rent, there's some advantages. There's some things you don't have to take care of. There's some maintenance you don't have to do on your own because somebody else does that for you. On the other hand, you're at the landlord's whim. If the landlord decides to make some changes to how things work, they want to raise the rent, they want to do things like that, you kind of have to go along with those. It's the same thing with businesses that built their digital presence on a Facebook page, is that Facebook changed the rules, which they were entirely within their rights to do. And so those businesses then had to either play by those new rules or figure out a new strategy. And so Facebook's probably the biggest one that's done that has really driven that point home, that if you're going to build an online business, you need to build that online business with assets that you own, really, and control. And that doesn't mean you have to run servers in your house. That doesn't mean you have to write all your own software from scratch for this. But it does mean that things like, your content, your audience, the people that are on your email list, the people that, you connect with, the more of that content that you can have control over and that you have in a fashion where it's portable, that you could take it and move it somewhere else, the better long-term position you're going to be in for that online business. So instead of getting Facebook likes, for example, you would want to get email addresses, because how many people in this room have an email address? Every single hand goes up, right? That's kind of the prerequisite to getting onto any of these other social networks where, even the social network that almost everybody uses, it's still almost, whereas everybody has an email address. And for the most part, everybody will check that at least once a day. I mean, email usage patterns, kind of like any online usage pattern, they vary by demographic, kind of the meme that right now is that email is for old people, but the reality is everybody uses it in some form.
But what majority of that, for my email habits, I just see it as spam and I don't even bother. Like, sometimes you just can't keep up with getting rid of your spam, so you just ignore it to begin with.
There's a pop-up. We'll talk about that. Those pop-ups are really annoying, aren't they, right? They also work really well to get people to subscribe to your email list. You get all that email and you see it as spam. And so that's the danger with email, is that if people start subscribing to all sorts of stuff and you start using email in a bad way, they're going to see you as spam. And so the trick is to make sure that you're providing value in exchange for that email subscription. So we'll definitely talk a little bit more about email. But your main platform, your main website, that ought to be something that you kind of have some control over. I like WordPress. I've used WordPress since it was version like 0.9 or something. I think it was 2004 when I started using WordPress, so it's been a while. I've kind of grown up with it. I've watched features develop and evolve over time. It's open source, which is nice, which means that it's not going to go away overnight. There's no single company that can kind of decide to change the way WordPress works and immediately leave all the WordPress users abandoned. It's not the only platform that's out there. There are other open source like content management systems you could use, like Drupal. There are a variety of closed source web hosting platforms that have gained some popularity in the last few years because they are fairly easy to use for most common purposes. Squarespace is one. Wix is another. There's a couple others as well. The main thing with something like a Squarespace is that Squarespace is Squarespace, and much like Facebook gets to make its own rules for Facebook, Squarespace gets to make its own rules for Squarespace. There's lots of people that use it, lots of people that are happy with it. As long as you're doing kind of the main things that fit within the frameworks of what they allow you to do, it works great. So there's not a single right answer, and everything's a trade-off in business and in life, right? So you can find something that's essentially almost free, but maybe you have to do a lot of work yourself as far as maybe the customization of the site and maintaining it over time. Or you can find something where you pay a lot of money to somebody else to deal with all that maintenance. My take on it, and what I typically recommend for like most small businesses that are getting online, and when photographers talk to me about like, cool, so I'm a wedding photographer, I need a website for my portfolio, I want to have people find me on the internet and call me up to book their wedding or fill out my online form. What I will often point them towards is go with an independent web hosting company, put WordPress on there. Web hosting companies are like anything else. There's some really cheap ones, there's some really expensive ones. When it comes to web hosting, you've got kind of your cheap shared web hosting, your GoDaddies, your Bluehosts, your companies like that, where their base product is going to cost $3 a month, $5 a month, less than $10 a month, and they'll provide you with a basic shared web server where you can put your website up. It's a shared hosting environment. You're going to be on a web server probably with 100 to 300 other websites on that same web server, which usually is fine. Occasionally can be a problem, depending on how they have things configured. You hope that one of those other websites doesn't get compromised from a security standpoint. You hope that one of those other websites doesn't get really, really popular and then just bog down the whole server. From a web hosting side of things, you can spend a little bit more money. There's a lot of companies in the WordPress space in the last 5 years that have moved into what's known as managed web hosting. And what managed web hosting is they're better isolating your resources on the server. Sometimes it's a dedicated server. Usually it's a kind of pseudo-dedicated thing. It's not as shared as a shared server. But usually what a managed web host does is they take care of a lot of kind of the WordPress maintenance for you. They're going to make sure that your WordPress installation gets updated with all the latest security patches that get released. They're going to take care of doing backups for your site. That's a very important thing. If you're building an online business, you need to have a backup of your website because, much like if you work on a giant paper, for Bruce's class, because he's mean, he's going to make you write a 50-page paper at the end of the term or something. 75, okay. If you get to page 73 of that and you haven't backed it up and your computer crashes and you lose that, you're going to be really pissed. Same kind of thing if you have an online business and, something happens to your website, whether it be, the data center burns down, whether it be, you weren't keeping it up to date and it did get hacked by somebody and, got compromised. You want to have a backup of your website. The managed WordPress web host will often do a lot of things around security, ensuring that things are a little more secure than they are out of the box, and some things like that. And so, and a managed host, you're going to pay, depending on who you go with, you're going to pay anywhere from probably $15 to $30 a month. So it's a significant price increase over the $3 a month or $5 a month shared hosting. But on the other hand, if you really are running a business, $15 or $25 a month isn't that expensive if you consider that's kind of your rent for your online storefront. And so, if you're a professional photographer who's shooting a bunch of weddings, so $25 a month, $300 a year basically is what that runs out to. $300 a year is not that much money to invest in your online platform. Yeah. And so once you kind of have that core for your online business, that's like your home base. If you use the solar system analogy, that's the sun. Everything else kind of rotates around that. So that's where you're going to have the main information about who you are and what you do. If you're selling products, that's where you'll have the shopping cart that sells your products probably. If you're providing, information, that's where the information is going to be, whether it's, on the website itself or as part of a blog. Blogging is kind of interesting in how that's evolved over the years. I'll hit on that in just a moment. But your website becomes kind of that core, that home base. And then everything else that you do probably drives back to it, whether that's social media, whether that's your blogging, whether that's email marketing, whether that's going to physical, in-person, offline events and talking about your business and then trying to, drum up interest, whether it's going to conferences and trade shows and things like that. It all kind of revolves around having that core website that's your home base. So I talked about email a little bit. Everybody I know who has any sort of a business that has an online presence, that has an email list that they're using, wishes they started that email list sooner. It's one of those things where probably, speaking for myself, but probably also speaking for a lot of the other people that have similar businesses to mine, the email list isn't necessarily the most sexy thing when you're kind of getting started and establishing your online presence. You're probably more interested in getting the website up and figuring out your website theme and figuring out what you're going to write about on the blog and figuring out what social networks are you going to use and how do you get followers on those social networks, and maybe figuring out what other sites are kind of in your industry or in your area of interest, and how are you going to connect with them and build some of those links. Maybe you're going to start thinking about search engine optimization so people can find you on Google or on Bing. But you're probably not necessarily thinking about building your email list. I would encourage you to start thinking about that from day one, because once you have someone's email address, you now have a direct route to their inbox. Unlike a social network where, like with Facebook, you're going to have to pay to guarantee to get showed to them, Or with something like Twitter or Instagram, you're kind of at the whim of maybe you're going to post about the time they happen to be looking at it, or maybe they're going to scroll back and see it. But like, I'm guessing most of you that use social networks like Twitter and Instagram or Pinterest, you don't see everything that goes on there, right? I mean, I'm on Instagram and, I post things most days and I scroll through there, but I know there's stuff I missed. I don't, I follow a bunch of people and I don't see every single thing that they post. But when you have an email and you send an email to somebody, that email is going to go to their inbox pending some weird technical problem. That email that you send is going to get delivered to all however many people you have on your list. So you want to start kind of building that list of email addresses. When you do that, there's kind of a technical side of that, and then there's the marketing side of that. From a technical standpoint, you're going to want an email service provider of some form. You don't want to just start like gathering email addresses and using Outlook or Gmail or something like that with a group to email to those people for a couple different reasons. One is most mail servers like that, at some point you will hit a limit that they won't let you send a message to more than a certain number of people. But the other issue, though, comes around deliverability, in that an email service provider whose business it is to send email, they do a lot of things to ensure that they have really good infrastructure, to ensure that they don't allow, a good reputable one will ensure spammers aren't using their email service. And so you won't end up getting in trouble because somebody marked you as spam and now all of a sudden your emails aren't going through anymore. There's a few email providers out there. Probably the biggest and most popular one that you hear about now is MailChimp. MailChimp, they will let you get started with up to, I think it's 2,000 subscribers for free is their current pricing model, which that's a lot of people. Odds are it'll be a while after you start your business before you hit 2,000 subscribers. MailChimp tries to kind of be an email provider that does everything for everybody. And so it's not necessarily the most straightforward to set up for some of the kind of the common things I want to do running an online information business. But it's a great way to get started. And with your email service provider, once you start building that list, there is a way to export that list. And much like you would back up your website, you want to back up your email list so that if something were to happen to your MailChimp account, you still have access to however many addresses you had on your list. You have a question there? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you use a CRM to do most of that storage for your email lists. You just put it in MailChimp, or you just use MailChimp directly?
I actually don't use MailChimp at this point. I use one called ConvertKit, which is, they don't have a free option. But ConvertKit was really designed as an email service provider for basically online businesses. And so it doesn't try to, like if you're running a retail website and you're trying to build a customer, or not a retail website, like a retail store, right? If I were Target, and my goal is to get people to come into my store and buy stuff that's on sale, and I want to aggregate that with, sales data that I have from my system, something like MailChimp or a higher end, e-commerce system can tie all that together. ConvertKit would totally not do that. ConvertKit's really all about working with bloggers, working with online information businesses, things like that. As far as where do you keep all that information, generally it just lives in the email service provider. Like I said, I do back that up. Basically, once a week I have a reminder to go and download that list that I then just download and store in my Dropbox account, so I have it. I've never had to use it for anything other than when I moved from MailChimp to ConvertKit, basically to export everything from MailChimp and move it into ConvertKit. But you want to have a backup of that as well. So with an email provider like MailChimp with ConvertKit, that gives you email infrastructure. So that gives you the ability that when you craft a message through their systems and send it out, it can say things like, at the bottom there can be an unsubscribe link, and when somebody clicks that unsubscribe link, it takes them off your list. There are some legal requirements around doing mass emails In the United States, most of that is regulated through some laws that were called the Can-Spam Act originally. And the Can-Spam Act has some requirements that your message must contain an unsubscribed link. It must contain a physical address of where you are located so that somebody could track down who this was really sent from if they wanted to. And there's a few other things around, legal compliance that all of these reputable email service providers will not only help you do, they will require that you do them, because it's in their best interest to not have somebody using their service for illegal means. And so, when you set up your account with them, they will require a physical address from you so that they can, force you to put that in as part of the footer of your message or things like that. So that's kind of the technical side of the email marketing. From a marketing side of things, you got to give people an incentive to get on your list. Very few people, some will, but very few people will go to a website, just be looking at the website, see an email subscribe box on the side that just says, give me your email address so you can get my newsletter, and go, oh, okay, let me put in my email address. What's a lot more common is you got to give them something in exchange, right? They're going to give you something of value. They're going to give you their email address and the permission to send them email. You need to provide them of something of value as well. And of course, the idea is that long term, you're going to do that with what you're going to send them, because you're hopefully not just going to be send them, advertising and sales messages. Hopefully, you're going to provide other valuable content. But usually, what you're going to offer is some sort of something in exchange for their email address. It's often called a lead magnet. Sometimes it's called, an opt-in incentive.
Incentive? I'm sorry.
An opt-in incentive. Huh. We've lost our...
It just went to sleep.
Maybe it'll wake up here when I scroll or click or something. Darn computers.
Please hold.
Right. Anyway, if it was up there... Power. System off. Press the power button to begin. Okay.
What's that?
Anyway, well, Bruce is goofing around with this. In the top of the sidebar on PhotoWebbo, what you see, there is an email subscription box. And basically what it says is, hey, I'm going to give you a free report with 8 things you can do today to make your photography website better. And you put in your email address, you click the go button. I've now got your email address on my list. As part of that process, okay, there we go, it's coming back up. So that's what's up in the right-hand corner there. As part of that process, immediately, I then send you an email address or an email that has a link to download a PDF with these 8 things that you can do to have a better photo website today. And it's just assorted tips and tricks and things. None of them are really convoluted. None of them cost any money. But it's things that people can do to improve their websites. And so when you look at my audience, which is photographers who are serious about having a better online presence, that's going to be something that's of value to them. Now, if I were trying to sell fishing lures on this website, that would be a really crappy lead magnet, because somebody who's really interested in fishing lures doesn't care about improving their photography website. So you want to come up with something that's, of relevance to your audience. Yeah. Any questions around kind of email marketing? Yeah.
So basically, you're just telling them exactly what type of email that you're sending them right off the bat, so that way they can get an idea of what you'll be sending them in the future? Exactly,
yeah. And so, that's a good teaser for the types of things that I talk about. I mean, if we look at what types of things I talk about, if we just kind of look at the homepage, it's like, cool, photographers first look at the new iPhones that came out were announced last week. I guess they came out last week as well. It's talking about, changes that are happening in Instagram this year. Instagram has made a bunch of changes in 2017 as far as everything from photo sizes and orientations to, slideshows with multiple photos to allowing, business accounts to put calls to action into their Instagram. There's some stuff on, time for spring cleaning on your website. We can talk about what if you got a pile of photos in Dropbox, you want to turn those into a gallery on your website. Well, I wrote an article that tells you 2 different ways to do that with a couple different options. There's an article about search engine optimization. So you can kind of see a theme here. These are all things about having a better online presence as a photographer. And yeah, so once I have their email address, I'm going to send them information. Sometimes it's just going to be information. Sometimes it'll be like, hey, I will send a message out when I write a new article. It's like, hey, I just wrote this article. A lot of you are using Dropbox. I've talked about how to use Dropbox as a photographer in the past. If you want to turn that into a photo gallery, here's a couple options to do that. So sometimes I'm just giving them information. Sometimes I'm trying to sell them something. This is a business. I'm not doing this purely for fun. And when I sell them something, I will send them an email. And, there's not a lot of sense in trying to pretend you're not selling anything. People will figure out you're selling stuff. But, when I'm trying to sell them something, yeah, I've got an audience that's interested in this topic. And again, I'm not going to try and pitch them on, pizza recipes or, a pizza restaurant coupon, because, that's not why they're here. That's the kind of thing that will get you marked as spam. But let's say, a web hosting company that I love is doing a, October Halloween sale next month or something. And so it's a company that maybe I'm already recommending, and now they're going to give people a 20% discount if they sign up next month through me. And for every referral I send them, they're going to give me $200 for a new web hosting customer. For example, that's actually what this tile right here does. WP Engine is a managed web hosting company that I have an affiliate relationship with. They've set up a coupon. You click that link on my website, you get 20% off your first payment with them, which means if you're doing a yearly account, you're getting a couple months free. And if you're a new WP Engine customer and you sign up through me, they send me $200, assuming you don't cancel within the first 30 days. So that's one of the ways I make money on my website. A couple questions, yeah.
So what would be the ratio as far as the ads that you would send to the people on your email list? Would it be like 25%? For every 4 emails that you send them, maybe 3 useful ones for them, and maybe 1 ad? Yeah.
How much is giving versus asking? It's interesting depending on who you talk to. They'll give you different numbers. And it's the same kind of thing on social media. If you're using social media, you don't always want to be selling on social media. At some point, you just want to be social on social media and participating in conversations. I try to, mix it up such that, it's kind of different in different places. But yeah, saying 4-to-1, 5-to-1 is fairly common. How many people have heard of Gary Vaynerchuk? Just Bruce? Interesting. Okay. Gary V. So Gary Vaynerchuk is interesting. If you go search for Gary V, V-E-E, and you will find him. Gary made a big name for himself in social media probably 9 years ago. He got famous. Gary's big thing was that he sold wine on the internet. His parents had a wine business in New Jersey, and Gary started a website called Wine Library, and Gary started a video show called WineLibrary.tv where he reviewed wine. And Gary is a no BS, in your face, gonna swear all the time, gonna tell you like it is, brash, harsh personality. And he wasn't the fancy French wine critic. He was the this wine tastes like dirt guy, right? And Gary got out there on social media and became very, very rich and very, very famous by doing this, by being one of the first people to kind of do this with social media. Where I was going with that, though, is Gary has since then done things like written books around how he did some of this stuff. And he actually had a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook that was all about that mix of, mixing things up. And so with the Jab, 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 Right Hook, he's using a boxing analogy, obviously. But he's talking about so you give them some free stuff, you give them some free stuff, you give them some free stuff, and then you hook them with the sales pitch. But you're not just doing the hook. It's a mixture of give and get. Chris Brogan was another guy who kind of got famous on social media early on. Chris used to talk about, he became very big on Twitter. He used Twitter extensively, especially in, say, the 2007 to 2010 timeframe. He would always talk about when he was tweeting, he would always want to be, tweeting with like a 8-to-1 ratio of basically conversation and sharing other people's stuff versus doing self-promotion. And so it's kind of one of those things. Nobody likes if you go to a party and as soon as you meet somebody, they're like, here's my business card, buy my stuff, right? Nobody likes that guy. And it's the same thing online. People don't want to be sold to if they don't know who you are. Now maybe you have something that's good for them, that will be helpful for them. It's okay. It's okay to sell. You're not going to make any money unless you sell. And so that's why I don't feel bad if at some point, if I figure out that I have a solution that's good for somebody, that's going to help them out, that fits their needs, I'll be kind of pushy about selling it because it's going to really benefit them, So there's a lot of photographers wasting a lot of time on like bad SEO practices or SEO practices from 5 years ago. And so instead of doing that, I want to make sure they spend their time on things that are going to be relevant in 2017 for search engine optimization. And so, I will encourage them to get an SEO audit from me for $100 where we look at where they're at right now and then kind of develop a plan to go forward. And sometimes that plan to go forward involves hiring me to do that. More often than not, about 60-40, it's cool. They've got kind of a list of where they're at, where they want to go, and then they're probably going to go off and do a lot of that on their own. Yeah.
I was just curious if you use like a web statistics engine to gather like keyword searches that go to your website, and then do you write content based on those to help kind of gear what relevant content you might want to start writing about?
Yeah. And I swear I didn't plant him in the audience, but that's kind of a good transition into talking about content strategy and content marketing. So it's not just purely random what I choose to write about or what I throw up on the website. The idea is I'm going to put some strategy, hopefully, into what do I write about, when do I write about it, how do I market it. He was asking about, do I use, web analytics to figure out what people are interested in? Yeah, I do. I use Google Analytics, which is probably the most common analytics software out there. It's free. You sign up through a Google account. It's google.com/analytics, I believe. And they just give you basically a chunk of JavaScript that you then drop into your website template. Or if you're using a system like Squarespace, they have an interface through their admin interface where you basically drop that tag in. And then every time somebody visits your website, it records it through Google Analytics. You find out where they came from, what pages they visited, how long were they on your site, things like that.
Is that for WordPress too?
Yeah, we'll work with WordPress, either self-hosted WordPress or with WordPress.com. On WordPress.com, kind of like with Squarespace, there is a place through the admin interface you can put in your Google Analytics ID, and then it'll give you that information. So sometimes I'm looking at my analytics. Sometimes I write an article and it's like, wow, nobody cared about that. Okay, good information to know. On the other hand, there's articles that I've written where it's like, okay, I wrote this article in, 2015, and it's still getting a lot of traffic to my website. There's still a lot of people searching for that topic. And what that tells me is that, cool, that's still a relevant topic, and B, if I make this even better, I can become more of an authority for this thing, right? So if you go search for email marketing for photographers, for example, as a Google search, hopefully, you'll find an article that I wrote called Email Marketing for Photographers, Getting Started. And it's a fairly substantial article that really goes through the basics of why do you want to do email marketing, what's an email service provider, who should you use, what should you send to your list, how often should you send to your list, how do you deal with some of the legal compliance things and things like that. So it's a helpful article. And when you write helpful content, people will link to it and people will share it on social media, so that's good. But the idea is, cool, so what's the strategy around that? What's in it for me? How does that help me? Well, by providing helpful, good content that's useful for my audience, they're going to keep coming into my website. They're hopefully going to sign up for my email list so I have contact with them. They're going to tell their friends about me, right? So if I help someone out with that article, get an email list up and running, and then they're talking to another photographer, a friend of theirs who needs to get started with email, they're going to be like, hey, go to PhotoWebo, get the email getting started article. One of the other things about that piece of content, that article, is that at some point when I realized it was really, really popular and it was bringing in a lot of search engine traffic, I put email opt-in gate on it. So when you go to that article, you can read about the first third of it or so just fine. And I've given you a bunch of really great information at that point, and then you get to a point where I think it's just email. Is it email photographers? Oh, it might be email marketing. I'm trying to remember the exact URL. I'll show this to you instead of, hey, there we go. Cool. So you go to this article, you scroll down, you read a bunch of useful information, you have a list. Oh, and then you get to the point where I'm going to give you a whole bunch of tips on what to do and how to get people on your list. And you hit that thing that says, hey, great, you want to see the rest of this article? Give me your email address for free, and I'll instantly unlock the rest of this article. And so, you put in, Bob at some point I'll go take this off my email system later. You put in bob at whatever.com, say unlock the email article, and now you've got the entire rest of the article that you get to read, where I tell you how to do this, what should you send, what are some subject lines that'll work, some thoughts on design, some advanced tips. But now I've got Bob's email address, and I can keep in touch with Bob. Didn't cost Bob anything. Bob got that big, cool article for free. And I got a subscriber to my email list. That email gate thing converts at about a 30% conversion rate on that article. So about a third of the people that go to that article give me their email address. On my site in general, there's an email opt-in box at the bottom of the articles. That converts at about a 2% conversion rate. So 2% versus 30%. Now you wouldn't be able to do that with every article. I mean, if it's only a short article, the value's not there. I mean, if people do that and then they get like one more sentence, they're going to kind of feel like you screwed them, right? So that doesn't leave a good taste in anybody's mouth. On the other hand, as you can see with that, I gave them a substantial amount of information before that opt-in gate, and then I gave them a bunch more information after that. The software that I'm using to do that, the software that I used for the pop-up message that you saw as well, is a WordPress plugin called Opt-in Monster. And all it does is email opt-in forms. It integrates with WordPress. It integrates with a bunch of other services, but it integrates with WordPress. Connects to your email service provider, whether it's ConvertKit or MailChimp, or there's like 30 or 40 of them that it supports. And it's just all about optimizing that conversion. Yeah.
Is it algorithm to recognize that a user's already been there so they don't keep getting it?
Yes.
They want to go look through stuff, because I would like be annoyed stuff.
Yes. And like the pop-up, like we saw the pop-up the first time we went here. This computer won't see that pop-up again now for, I think, 4 or 6 months. So like I'll hit you with that pop-up the first time you come in, once you start reading for a little while. And that pop-up actually works on, and this is also an opt-in monster thing, it works on what's called exit intent. You don't get the pop-up till I think you're leaving the website. So if you're just clicking around down here, I want to go learn about platforms. My clients are on Instagram. Am I? What's the latest developments on Instagram? Cool. I can browse around here. There's an email marketing article. I can click over here. I can scroll around. It's not going to give me the pop-up until basically I move either I click a link to go elsewhere, or I move my mouse like up to the browser bar, or click away to a different tab. At that point, it'll trigger that pop-up.
I believe it already did. Close that.
Yeah, it did. So that's why it's not doing it again. It already gave me the pop-up once. So, but yes, if you like popped up on every page, that would really annoy people. So the idea is, offer something of value, ask for it, but don't annoy people, because if you annoy people, they're going to go away. You're going to become known as that website where, you go there and you get the pop-up on every page, even if I've already subscribed to the list, even if I've said I don't want the pop-up. You don't want to be that annoying guy. Yeah. I mean,
Do the Washington Post certificate.
Yeah, and nobody likes those pop-ups, right? I mean, I use those pop-ups, and they annoy me on other websites. On the other hand, but what I know, though, is that, things like that pop-up convert at like 10x the rate of just putting a, hey, if you want to subscribe box on the thing. And it's like, well, it's business. So, yeah, question.
With things like ad block kind of raising in popularity, how much does that affect your revenue?
It doesn't affect my revenue much at this point because I don't really run advertising in the traditional sense. I don't run any like banner ads. I don't run any Google AdSense or things like that on my website. Mainly because what I find is for what I'm offering, I've experimented with it. What I find is for what I'm offering, it doesn't perform well. And it runs into issues like things like ad blockers and things like that. I ran another site for a while that was all about a particular camera model. And I set up the site basically at the point where it got released, and I put some articles up around how to do things with this particular camera model, and I recommended accessories for this camera model. On that site, I ran some Google AdSense ads, which were basically serving up ads for related camera gear, and those actually converted at a pretty good rate. The types of AdSense ads that show up on my site here, which for those of you who aren't familiar, you've all seen Google ads all around the internet. Some of them are graphical, a lot of them are just kind of text-based, and so you'll see like the link with the short little snippet below it and then like a green URL and you click on it. It's an ad. But those get targeted based on subject matter, right? So if I'm running, if that website, which was all about the Nikon D7000, it's going to show ads that are related to the Nikon D7000. So the idea is it wants to show ads that are relevant. When I put AdSense on this site, for example, you get some web hosting ads, you get ads for various online services. You occasionally get random photography-related things, which are kind of related, but maybe not. Because like if somebody's on a site about how to build a better website or how to do better email marketing, sure, we can show them an ad for a lens, but that's not really why they're there. And so because that's not really why they're there, they don't convert that well. And so, so I haven't used those. But yeah, as the online world has evolved, things like kind of traditional display advertising, banner ads, things like that have just tanked as far as conversion rates and revenue and things like that. And so that's why you're seeing, less of that, in general overall, coupled with, part of it is because people have kind of figured it's often not relevant. But the other thing is you're starting to see more ad blockers being used. Apple made it possible with, I don't remember if it was iOS 9 or 10, you can install ad blockers onto your iPhone now, things like that. And so as those things have come around, the advertising and sales industries have kind of had to adapt.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of, avoiding noise, it's also a matter of security sometimes too.
Right, yeah.
Piggyback on all that.
Yeah, people are figuring out that they don't necessarily want to be tracked all around the internet. So, cool. So we talked about the platform, we talked about email. I've mentioned social media several times. Social media is interesting. When Bruce and I started using Twitter back in the dark ages of Twitter, it was really just people. Brands didn't really have a social media presence at that point. At some point, brands started to have a social media presence.
Wiffies did.
Right. There was. Anybody know Wiffies? Nobody knows Wiffies.
Whatever Wiffy is, like a
So,
torrent.
Wiffies was a food truck over in Portland at 12th and Hawthorne that sold fried hand pies. So think like a Hostess pie, but like made out of actual ingredients instead of just chemicals. And so a guy named Greg Abbott ran Wiffies, and Greg sold the cart and closed the Wiffies business probably 3 or 4 years ago at this point. But Greg was kind of interesting in that Greg got on Twitter really early on, and as Twitter took off in popularity in Portland, especially amongst kind of the tech crowd, Greg was on there and participating and would host, Twitter meetups at the food cart and would tweet things like, hey, mention you saw this tweet, I'll give you $1 off a pie when you come by, for the rest of the evening, and things like that. And, Greg was a cool guy. Interestingly enough, after closing down his food truck life, Greg went to become a software developer. But Greg was a philosophy major his first time through college. And so, but businesses weren't on Twitter as much. And then that ramped up. Facebook started as college students and then became personal people, and then eventually brand pages got added in. Pinterest used to just be people. And then they figured out, and this isn't just coincidence that this always works this way. It's kind of the model, the business model for most social networks is you build a user mass and then you monetize it. And usually the way that you monetize it is you find people who are willing to pay to get in front of that user mass, which is when you get the brand pages, which is when you get promoted tweets on Pinterest, which is when you get, Twitter sponsored tweets and things like that. And so as brands start taking over social media, the users kind of figure out how to adapt. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But I know when Instagram first rolled out advertising, it seemed like there was a period where it seemed like every third frickin' photo I saw on Instagram was a sponsored Instagram ad from somebody. And then they tweaked their algorithm. It's not quite that bad anymore, so that's good. And I don't mind seeing the occasional sponsored one. I mean, I'm not paying anything to use Instagram, so I'm okay seeing the occasional ad. But when you look at how do you use social media for your business, part of it can be, yes, I'm going to pay to get a tweet in front of a certain number of people. I will occasionally boost something on Facebook from the PhotoWebo Facebook page to explicitly go reach more people. Generally, it's something where there's a paid offer and I'm going to get paid for people who convert from that. One of the people I know wrote a ebook all about Facebook advertising for photographers. I'd be really dumb to not promote that on Facebook to my audience of photographers who are on Facebook. So he wrote this ebook through an affiliate partnership where I send him traffic and I get 40% of the revenue on his ebook sales that I send him. I'll be darn right. I set up a boosted post on Facebook for that, and I spent money to push that to be in front of my photographer audience on Facebook. It's the right people, it's the right platform. This was something that was going to be very, very relevant. I was willing to spend some money up front to get that ad in front of them, and in exchange, a bunch of them clicked the ad, a bunch of them bought the book, and eventually I get money from that. A lot of what I do on social media is a lot more organic, though. It's not buying a Facebook ad to push it in front of people. It's me just being helpful. And a lot of times, you asked about how do I figure out what to write about? One of the things that's interesting I figure out how to write about is kind of pay attention to what's getting asked on social media. So I go to Twitter about once a week, and I will go to the Twitter advanced search. And when you go to advanced search, you can put in keywords, obviously, that you want to search for on tweets, but one of the things you can search for is tweets that ask questions. So I will maybe go to a Twitter...
Can you show us that?
I think so, yeah. Let's see if we can get to it without being signed in. You might be able to. So I go to search.org, go to advanced search. Do you actually have to know the secret? Does it not actually mention it? Okay, well, let me show you the secret then. So let's say I wanted to figure out people who are asking questions about WordPress and photos. If I put a question mark in the search that I do, and then I always change it to view the latest instead of top, because top is their algorithm of what they think I'm most interested in. But if I change it to latest, I see, okay, so this is somebody who's posting how WordPress is auto-cropping. Instagram to WordPress photos are now automatically being categorized, and this is directed to IFTTT, which is a service. So if I knew something about how to answer that question, I will chime in on Twitter and answer that question. A lot of times if you're helpful to someone on Twitter and you're talking about something they're interested in, they will then follow you on Twitter. Cool, got a new follower who, when I then talk about something relevant. So here's an article from Scott Wyden-Kivowitz, who's someone I know who, Scott's probably the other guy on the internet who does closest to the same thing that I do with PhotoWebo. He works for a company called Imagely, which offers managed WordPress hosting for photographers, but he also writes a ton of articles around, better online things. Does WordPress do photos? What about Medium? And so these are all people asking questions about photos and WordPress. These are all people I could potentially give them a tweet reply to help out. But there are also people asking questions about photos and WordPress. These are the types of things they might also go search Google for. This might be an opportunity to write an article that's all about something like that. One of my, WordPress photos sideways. It autocompletes. That's interesting. That must be a common problem. Turns out it is. So, if you upload directly to WordPress from your smartphone, there's a good chance that WordPress may not be recognizing where your smartphone has saved, whether this is a vertical photo or a horizontal photo. This is a problem that people had with WordPress. At some point I figured out, oh, hey, I should write an article about that. So I did. I'm now the #1 result on Google for if you search for how to fix that problem. And that's an article that I originally wrote in February of 2016. I actually went through and I updated it in July of 2017. I changed one of the recommendations for a plugin that can help you work past that. Oh, hot damn. I'm glad I'm finally outranking WP Beginner. But now, I love the guy. WP Beginner was started by the same guy who started the Opt-in Monster plugin that I talked about, who also acquired and purchased Envira Gallery, which is the main photo gallery plugin. Now, I'm good friends with him, but on the other hand, he's got way more marketing smarts than I do, so when I outrank him, it's a nice little win. But this is a good example of this is a problem people were having. I wrote an article that was clear about how to fix it. I gave people some suggestions. I did some smart search engine optimization type things with that article, so paid attention to how do I have keywords worked in throughout the article? Do I have photos with the article? Is it at a good reading level? All sorts of these things that you can kind of all pay attention to for search engine optimization. And as a result, it's now the #1 ranking on Google for that. The other thing that's interesting is you've probably started to see more of these boxes up at the top of search results where Google tries to give you the answer that it thinks it is. If you can get an article where you are the result here, you will do very well from search engine rankings, because people will look, at this, but they will very often then click the link to go through. There's no formula to become they call it a magic box. There's no formula to become the Google magic box answers for things, and depending on what you search for, if I search for best, WordPress photo gallery, it's probably not going to get. That does give me a magic box. Interesting. It's that WP Beginner guy recommending his own gallery #1. Imagine that. Sometimes you get a magic box, sometimes you don't. Anyway, slight tangent there. But that can all be part of that. How I use social media from a business perspective is I'm helpful to people. That's probably the #1 biggest piece of advice, and that's a lot of how Gary Vaynerchuk, who we talked about, a lot of how Chris Brogan, who we talked about, got so popular on social media, is that they were helpful. I mean, Chris Brogan has talked about that's his #1 piece of advice, is be helpful. If you're helpful, people will like you. If they like you, they may follow you. If they follow you and they think they like you, they will buy your stuff if it's relevant to them.
You mentioned reading level. What is the reading level that works? I would imagine it's probably not too high.
About 5th grade.
Be patronizing
Right, yeah. But if you use WordPress, there's a plugin you should get called WordPress SEO by Yoast. Yoast SEO, the number one WordPress SEO plugin. It's a guy who's over in, I believe he's in the Netherlands, but it's a plugin that installs into WordPress. After you write an article, basically it will score your article from an SEO. You'll tell it what like keyword or what you want the article to be about, what you think people are going to search for, and then it basically gives you a traffic light, red, yellow, or green, and says you did great, you did okay, or you did crap.
Is that just for blogs or your whole website?
It's for any page on your website, so not just your blog posts,
Okay.
but any other page as well. But then it gives you essentially a checklist of like, you haven't included any images on this page. You should include some images. Or maybe you did include images, but you didn't include any of the search terms anywhere in the alt text for the images, which, as you may or may not know, when you have an image in HTML, there's alternative text that displays if the person's using a screen reader or something that doesn't display images. But search engines also look at that alternative text to get a clue what that image is about because they can't always tell. And so this Yoast plugin will really help you optimize things like that. So if you have a WordPress website, this is just for WordPress, but the concepts that it contains, things like that checklist. So here's a little trick. If you want to figure out SEO, if you go to my website and on the right-hand side, there's that SEO speed start. If you click that, yes, it will cost you your email address. But when you put your email address in there, I'm going to send you 5 articles over 10 days. You get a new article every couple of days. That kind of gives you the crash course on how to get 80% of the way there with what you need to know for SEO in 2017. So go do it. It's free. You'll be on my email list. You can unsubscribe at any time. There's a link right at the bottom.
Aaron, what schedules like those 5 emails? Is that ConvertKit?
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually scheduled. That's a good question, right? So how does that magically happen? So with ConvertKit, and you can set this up with MailChimp or another email service provider. So basically, if somebody subscribes to my list through this form, ConvertKit knows that they came from this form, and ConvertKit tags them as having come through this form, and it, in ConvertKit parlance, subscribes them to a sequence. And I've said, here's message 1, message 2, message 3, message 4, message 5, message 6. But it's a 5-part series. Well, you'll have to subscribe to find out what message 6 is. But and then it just says, I put all these messages in, and it says, great, send this one as soon as they subscribe. Then wait 2 days and send this next one. Then wait 2 days and send this next one. And so that's one of the things with email marketing is it's not always just like I want to sit down and send out an email right now to my whole list. You can also set up things like this. You can tie it into, like e-commerce systems, and you've all experienced this where, let's say, let's say I'm selling let's say I'm doing a promotion for selling an ebook on Facebook advertising, and so somebody indicates that they're interested in getting some Facebook advertising tips, or they buy a product that I'm selling. I can then subscribe them to a sequence where, hey, maybe the day after they bought that product, I send them an email that says, hey, cool, you should have gotten this thing. Let me know if you had any questions. Here's how people typically get started with this. And then maybe a week later, I send them another message that says, hopefully you've had a chance to try this out now. If you found that interesting, maybe here's something else you might want to go check out. Sometimes you might then try to upsell them onto a different product. Or it may just be more helpful information, things like that. But you're kind of staying in touch with them, and that's entirely automated. So you can use those sequences to manage things like that. So yes, I will send out newsletters or messages to my list where it's just like, hey, here's this thing that's happening now. I press send and it goes out right away. On the other hand, sometimes things are automated. If somebody subscribes by going in through this thing saying they want the free report on 8 actions they can take today, Cool, that's great. That's wonderful. They're on my list. They get the report immediately, delivered via email. What then happens is a couple days later, they get another message saying, hey, cool, hopefully you're finding that helpful. This is the kind of thing I talk about a lot. I'm also on social media. And it gives them links that if they want to then follow PhotoWebo on Twitter or subscribe to our Facebook page, they can. And then a few days later, they might get another email that says, cool, hope you're enjoying this stuff. You may also find this other thing interesting. And so it's all kind of a thing where, I drip that stuff out to them over time. Some businesses will set up ridiculously long, drawn-out drip sequences of things around this. So, yeah.
I was curious, so when it comes to you sending out stuff to people via their email subscription, do you contain the whole article or information within the email itself, or do you often link out over to back to the site?
It varies. Sometimes I will do stuff. Yes, and. So sometimes I will send something out to the list where I've got the whole thing in the email, and they don't need to link anywhere. Sometimes I will do that and let them know, hey, since you're on my email list, I'm sending these to you now. I'm going to publish this as an article next week on the website, especially if it's not something that's like super timely. And so they'll get the first glance at it. Sometimes, especially if it's like I just published, so like when I published the first look at the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10, I sent an email out to the list after that was fairly short, basically says, hey, you guys probably already heard Apple announced their new iPhones. There's lots of cool stuff. You've probably already heard a bunch about that, but I just wrote an article that's all about a photographer's take on it. I'm not going to talk about Face ID, but from a photography standpoint, let's talk about the new cameras. Let's talk about the new portrait lighting mode, things like that. So, cool.
I have a two-part question to that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
On that drip thing, because I just have a lot of marketing people.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have the statistics on like how effective those maybe say 5 sequences, or maybe like your first and your second one rocked, they got responses,
Yep.
by your third and fourth, fifth ones they didn't get any response, and then does it track, like, if, say, you sent me that and you said, like, hey, check out this other article, does it track in your SEO optimization that they got there from that email to your website?
Yeah,
right?
all of that is possible, and a lot of that can be configured with ConvertKit. So, like, on that email sequence, I know where did people, if they unsubscribed, where did they unsubscribe, right? Did they get Article 2 and then they unsubscribed? Did they get Article 4 and then they unsubscribed? When I send out an email that contains links, I can set those links up within ConvertKit to basically track who clicked those links. I can tag subscribers based on clicking on those links. So one of the things that I will sometimes do, especially if I have an offer where I'm selling something, is if I send out the email that says, hey, I've got this thing, I think it'd be a great fit, this web hosting company is doing a discount, here's the link to find out more, here's the offer link or something. Especially if I'm linking to a page on my website, I will basically track, did they click the link, but did they not finish the process? Because then I'll follow up with that. So they showed interest, but they didn't convert, as opposed to somebody who didn't click the link at all in the email, right? So all of that is, these are some of kind of the beauty of the configuration of getting these analytics so that you know what works. Yeah, question?
So we've been talking about, the getting subscribers to your website, but on the other end, how do you build relationships with the advertisers that you have on your website?
Right.
Because
Perfect.
that would be like the other side.
Yeah. And that's kind of a segue into the last thing I'm going to talk about here, which is where does the money come from? And then we'll wrap up. Yeah, right. Show me the money. Like I said, this is the business. I'm not doing this entirely for fun. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I can run, probably 95% of what I do with this as a business from my iPad. So it's great. I can sit on my couch and figure this stuff out. So where does the money come from? So with an online information business like I'm running, your money is going to come from a few potential different sources. So one would be as if you were running display advertising on the website, whether that's Google AdSense, whether that's me selling ads directly. Maybe I've got a vendor that wants to pay me directly to put an ad there, or maybe I'm embedding ads from a source like Google. That's not really a thing I do. Another kind of big obvious thing is I can sell products myself. A lot of people sell information products. I actually have a couple under development, one that'll be released pretty soon, where, let's say I'm going to release an ebook. I build an ebook, I put the ebook on the website, people go to the website, they say, hey, this looks awesome, they put in their credit card number and they get the ebook from me. Cool, I've sold a digital product directly. That can be a source of income. Another source of income is through, and I've talked about a couple of them, through affiliate relationships. And so what an affiliate deal looks like, or affiliate marketing, affiliate partnership, is somebody else has a product or a service or something that they're selling. I partner up with them. They have an affiliate program, meaning they partner up with people like me. And they basically give me a unique tracking link that I use when I link to them, and I refer people to them. And when people who click through on that unique tracking link turn into their customers, they give me a commission from that. And so I mentioned, WP Engine, for example. If you go sign up for a web hosting account tonight through that link, and you stay a WP Engine customer for, I think it's at least 30 or 60 days. Basically, you don't cancel during their free trial period. They'll send me $200 for every new customer they get, because they know that the lifetime cost of a customer is such that they're willing to pay $200 to get one. Amazon has an affiliate program. If I want to recommend, do I still have the books page? I don't have the books page. So if I go to the business resources page on my website here, and I scroll down somewhere, there's an article about photography business books. So here's a bunch of business books that I recommend people read if you're trying to do online photography business stuff. There's that jab, 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 right hook. If I click this jab, 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 right hook link and I go to Amazon and I buy this book, I'm going to get a commission for that book sale from Amazon. Now it's not $200. It's like between 6 and 8%. So that's not very much on a $22 book. But on the other hand, Amazon will pay me 6 or 8% of everything the person bought on Amazon during this session. So if they then go buy anything else, I get a commission on that as well.
You were the gateway to the website. But how do you build those affiliates?
So how do you build those relationships?
Do you ask them, or do they come to you?
Both. So you can start building some affiliate relationships even when you may not necessarily have much of a following or an audience. So like Amazon, if you Google for Amazon, they call it their associates program. Anybody can go sign up. If you have some sort of a website and you look legit, they will approve you, and you can start handing out Amazon referral links to people today. On the other hand, it's not going to pay very well. A lot of it has to do with establishing kind of some sort of credibility, establishing some sort of authority. Most people who have affiliate programs, they want more affiliates because they know that you're probably reaching people they may not be reaching directly. So photographers may not have heard of WP Engine, but they go to my website for recommendations. I recommend WP Engine, then they go sign up. WP Engine reaches somebody that they may not have otherwise reached. Yes, WP Engine, it's going to cost them $200 for that lead because they're going to pay me. But they're going to make that up over time. If there's a product that you're interested, so every time I'm interested in recommending something, I never recommend anything without looking to see if they have an affiliate program. Now, don't misconstrue that as saying I only recommend things that have an affiliate program. I'm not gonna recommend something I don't endorse or that's crappy because they're going to pay me. That's a good way to kill your reputation. Is if you start endorsing bad products, people are going to stop wanting to take your recommendations. But on the other hand, if they have an affiliate program, I would recommend WP Engine even if they weren't paying me. I would recommend, this Aurora HDR software that I use, even if they weren't paying me. As it is, if you go through, they're going to pay me about $20 if you buy the software. And so it's a case where, in a lot of cases, I will approach them, especially if I can see publicly that they have an affiliate program. If I don't, I can always contact them directly. Occasionally, I have people that approach me because they want to do something. And occasionally, and I'll wrap up with this, and that's not just on the affiliate program side and on the money side. That can also be part of the content marketing strategy as well. The good news is if you write enough articles and you're not full of crap, and people start noticing that, you develop some sort of an authority, and people will notice that. You can then maybe get some stuff out of that. In the last 48 hours, I've gotten an email, one from Opt-in Monster, saying, hey, we want to feature you as a case study on our site. We like what you're doing with that email gate on a couple of the articles that you're using. I know that you've gotten good results. Give us some more information so that we can feature you as a case study. They're going to do that. That will expose me to a whole bunch of people who may not have ever heard of me that may then come to my website and stick around. Another one, I got an email from this morning, Eventbrite. You may have used Eventbrite to buy tickets to things. Eventbrite is trying to partner up with some people that they can help promote via social media. They want me to write an article all about how to get ready and go to a photography conference. It's something that I've written similar articles to in the past. They want me to write that article, and then they want to promote that article for me. Okay. Eventbrite has a much bigger audience than I do. If they want to promote my stuff to their audience, cool. All it's going to cost me is the time to write it. I'll wrap up with a last cool story under the category of you never know where weird, cool connections are going to happen with online business and social media. So back in 2007, when I joined Twitter, it was February of 2007, a lot of things didn't exist there. But one of the things that, happened was there were so few people there that you would just kind of get randomly connected to people. And if they were interesting, you would follow them, kind of even if you didn't necessarily have a super tight connection. I met a lot of people in the local area, like Bruce, because it's like, oh, he's on Twitter, he's interesting, he's in Vancouver too, cool. Somehow, I started following a woman named Leah who lived in Chicago. And in hindsight, we went back, and all we can figure out is we both know a guy named Josh who works at Intel in Hillsboro. And so Josh had to have been the connection there. There must have been a Twitter conversation where Josh was talking to one of us, and the other one saw and then chimed in. Anyway, Leah and I started following each other on Twitter in 2007. At the time, Leah was a secretary for a marketing company. Fast forward a couple of years, and we kind of casually remained in touch via Twitter. We didn't become BFFs or anything, but Leah started her own social media company based on the things she'd learned at the marketing agency and picked up along the way. She was working with bands specifically. In 2010, I went to South by Southwest, the big festival down in Austin. Leah was down there both for her band stuff with the music side of it, but also for the South by Southwest Interactive, the technology side. It's the only year I've ever gone down to South by Southwest, but one of the things Leah did while she was down there, she hosted a dinner for a dozen people that she'd never met in real life but knew online, and she invited me to go to this dinner. So I went to dinner with Leah and 11 of her not closest friends. That was the first time I'd met Leah. So we hung out. Fast forward a couple more years, and we've stayed in touch, off and on via Twitter. I get a message from her in, I think it was 2013 now. I get a message from her, and Leah had since kind of shut down her band social media agency. She'd gone to work for a PR firm. I get a direct message from her on Twitter. She's like, hey, 2 questions. Have you ever worked with GoPro? And could you go to Alaska in 2 weeks? And so this was in March, I think, and I said, I've used GoPro cameras. I've never worked with the company. And yeah, tell me more. And so it turns out GoPro was a client of her PR company at the time. And GoPro was up in Alaska. They were doing some interesting things working with a nonprofit that develops middle school science curriculum called Project Ether. And what they were doing was they were going to take GoPro cameras, attach them to weather balloons, send them up 100,000 feet up into the air to try and get photos of the northern lights with these GoPros. And it's something that hadn't been done before. And as part of doing that, they wanted somebody other than just GoPro and this middle school science curriculum to know about it happening. And so the PR company was inviting about a dozen people to go up for a few days on this trip that had reach of some sort into some group. And so they wanted a photography blogger. And my name came to mind because Leah knew of me, having followed me along Twitter for 6 or 7 years at this point. So I got to go to Alaska on GoPro's dime. They gave me a bunch of camera gear. I got to go see the Northern Lights in person. Highly recommended. Kind of one of those bucket list things if you ever get the chance. And got to go up there. In addition to kind of little old me, there were people there from National Geographic. There was someone there from Yahoo Sports. That was back when Yahoo was kind of a thing before they fizzled. The editor-in-chief and one of the other editors from Engadget were there. So if you're into tech blogs, you know that that's one of the biggest ones. And so we put cameras on the balloons. We sent them up into the sky. We got some really interesting footage. Cool opportunity, met a lot of great people, got camera gear out of it, got a free trip to Alaska out of it. And it was all because at some point in 2007 on social media, both of us were like, oh, this person's kind of randomly interesting. I guess I'll follow them. And so when people talk about like social media, they get hung up on the ROI, what's the return on that investment? And sometimes you just don't know what that return's going to be. I don't know how many hours I'd spent, conversing with Leah over the years on Twitter. But, there wasn't a plan there. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to follow this person because I think I can get this thing out of her eventually. It's just one of those pure kind of coincidences and happenstances that happened because I made connections and established myself as an authority in some sort of a space, even a fairly narrow one. And so you just kind of never know. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up officially. If you have questions, I'll stick around until you guys are ready to go. But on the other hand, despite what Bruce said, I don't want to have you here for a 3-hour class all night. So, yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.